Okay, let's dive into this incredible story of how a political movement that was basically dead in the water was brought roaring back to life by two of the most unlikely allies you can imagine. We're going to look at the strategy, the setbacks, and the amazing triumph of India's Home Rule movement. So, picture this. It's 1914. India's struggle for independence has completely stalled. You know, the fire and passion from the early years? It's pretty much burned out. And the big question everyone was asking was, what's next? Who could possibly pick up the torch and get things moving again? All right, to really get what the Home Rule movement was all about, we've got to set the scene. And the scene was, well, a total political vacuum. The main nationalist organization had lost its voice, it had lost its way, and honestly, things looked pretty bleak. And this slide really tells the whole story, doesn't it? The Indian National Congress, which was supposed to be the engine of the movement, was just broken. There was this huge split back in 1907 between the so-called moderates, who wanted slow reform, and the extremists, who wanted to push harder. The wounds from that were still deep. Key leaders were gone, either in exile or just retired. The government had cracked down hard on activists, and the moderates who were left were just completely disillusioned. It was a total void. But then, something happens. One man gets out of prison, and it changes everything. After 6 long years, Bal Gangadhar Tilak is released, and his return to the political scene was the exact spark that the nationalist movement desperately needed. And that spark, it wasn't just one person. It came from this really unlikely partnership. We're talking about two people from completely different worlds who somehow found common ground on one powerful idea: self-rule for India. I mean, just look at this. On one hand, you've got Bal Gangadhar Tilak, a famous extremist leader, a veteran nationalist, just out of jail and ready for a fight. And on the other, Annie Besant, a 66-year-old British activist and theosophist who had made India her home and her cause. She was looking at what was happening with the Irish Home Rule movement and thought, hey, we can do that here. Can you imagine a more unlikely duo?
So, what was their first move? Well, it wasn't to start some brand new thing. They were smart. They knew that the Indian National Congress, even in its sorry state, was the only group that really represented the whole nation. So their first goal was simple: fix it, bring it back to life.
Okay, so here was the plan, and it was pretty clever. Step 1, Tilak makes this public declaration of loyalty to the crown. It was a tactical move, really, designed to calm down the nervous moderates. Step 2, Annie Besant starts working on the Congress leadership, pushing them to let the extremists back in. And the endgame? A united, powerful Congress that could finally launch a real, nationwide movement for home rule. But it didn't work. They hit a total brick wall. The old guard of the moderates, especially the powerful Bombay group led by Firuz Shah Mehta, just shut it down completely. The doors to Congress stayed closed, and our two leaders had to go back to the drawing board. So what do you do when Plan A fails? Well, Tilak and Besant didn't just pack up and go home. They figured, okay, if we can't get in through the front door, we'll build our own house right next to it. If they couldn't revive the old organization from the inside, they'd just create their own momentum on the outside. So they kept pushing. And look, by December 1915, they actually get a win. Congress finally agrees to let the extremists back in. But the organization itself was still just sitting there, not doing anything. Tilak, being Tilak, was like, I'm not waiting around anymore. So in April 1916, boom, he launches his own Indian Home Rule League. Besant held out a little longer, but by September, it was clear Congress wasn't going to move, so she launched her own All-India Home Rule League. Now, this is where things get really smart. You might think two leagues means a rivalry, right? Nope, this was a partnership, a strategic division of labor. Tilak's league was super organized and focused on his home turf in Maharashtra. Besant's league was a much looser network that covered basically everywhere else. It was a brilliant way to avoid any drama between their followers. And you don't have to take my word for it. Annie Besant herself laid it out pretty clearly. She basically said, look, some of his people don't like my people, and vice versa. We get along fine, but let's just keep things simple and separate. It was pure pragmatism, all in service of the same goal. All right, so the organizations are set up. Now what? Well, now they unleash this massive political education campaign. I mean, on a scale India had never seen before. The idea was to take this concept of self-rule out of the fancy meeting rooms and get it into the hands of ordinary people. And when I say massive, I mean it. Just look at that number, 300,000. That's how many pamphlets Besant's group sold before her league was even officially a thing. They set up libraries, they held political discussion groups, they used every tool they had to get the message out there. It was a grassroots movement in the truest sense. And the reason their message hit home was because it wasn't just some vague, high-level political talk. They were talking about stuff that mattered to everyday people. Things like creating states based on language so people could be governed in their own tongue, or providing education in local languages. These ideas were radical and so far ahead of their time. And this quote from Tilak, wow, it's just so modern, you know? He's basically saying, hey, being alien has nothing to do with where you're from or what you look like. It's about whose side you're on. Are your interests aligned with the people of India? That's a powerful, inclusive idea of what a nation can be. So, the movement is picking up steam. And of course, the British government gets nervous. And they do what they always do, they try to shut it down. But, and this is a big but, it backfired. Big time. I mean, you can't make this up. On Tilak's 60th birthday of all days, the government tries to slap him with this huge fine for good behavior. But it completely blows up in their face. Tilak gets a brilliant young lawyer to defend him, none other than Mohammed Ali Jinnah, and they win. The case becomes a national sensation, and membership in Tilak's league just explodes. And Tilak knew exactly what this meant. He saw right away that the government had just handed him the best recruiting poster he could ever ask for. He basically said their repression would make the movement spread like wildfire, and boy was he right. The attempt to silence him just made his voice and the cause of home rule 100 times louder. So, in the end, the leagues themselves didn't last forever, but that wasn't really the point. Their real achievement was huge. In just a couple of years, they woke up a sleeping giant. They revived the entire national movement, they patched up the old wounds between the moderates and extremists, and they totally set the stage for the next massive phase of the struggle, led by Gandhi. And that really leaves us with this incredible question, doesn't it? It's a classic story, a lesson that we see again and again in history. Sometimes, when you try to silence a voice, all you do is give it a megaphone for the whole world to hear.